supporting victims of gender-based violence in the workplace. Indrani is a philanthropist and advocate for women's health and empowerment. She is the founder of Raft Cares, previously Indrani's Light Foundation, which is a nonprofit foundation dedicated to improving the level of care for domestic violence survivors by training and supporting frontline domestic violence caregivers and reducing compassion fatigue and burnout. Indrani is a tireless advocate for girls and women, leading empowerment trainings in several countries around the world. She's a board member of Every Woman Treaty and Think Equal. In 2013, Indrani joined forces with the global health organization PSI and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to transform the lives of girls and women and lift them out of poverty. She's an author, speaker, and certified life coach who has delivered keynote addresses at conferences and leads workshops around the world. Welcome, Indrani.
Thank you.
Now yes, thank you for being here. And I love the spirit fingers that you were giving previous, and it was like a great marrying effect because I was doing the same. So lots of praise, and I'm excited to hear your conversation. Joining Indrani in conversation today, we have Zara, Global Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Strategist and Trainer at Power to Fly. So welcome everyone. Take it away, please.
Hello, Indrani. Thank you for joining us.
Sarah.
Hello. So I'm really looking forward to speaking to you and learning a little bit more about the connection between domestic and gender-based violence and the workplace and what we can really do to help. Some might say that gender-based violence is a personal matter that is separate from work. What would you say to that?
I would say that first I would smile like I'm doing now, and I would say that is a cop-out. Because we know that violence in any form disrupts all the other areas of a person's life. So if I was just beaten or raped at home and I get myself together and I come to work, how do I cut that off? Also, if my boss thinks, oh my gosh, they're on the phone all the time and look, she's really on it, but it's really my abuser who's stalking me and saying, wait till you get home.
Right.
How can I be fully at work?
Right.
And let us, while the majority of victims are female, let us not pretend that there are not male victims.
Right. Right. Absolutely. And I mean, you raised such a good point as well, right? You don't know what someone else is going through. So an employer might be viewing certain things and thinking one thing, but unless you know, it's very hard to kind of like make those assumptions. And again, like you said, everything bleeds into everything else. So like that makes a lot of sense. I would like to hear a little bit more from you when we talk about the burden of gender-based violence. What is that really for the individual?
So let's go to a case study. Someone is beaten at home and has the physical harm, the emotional harm, the insecurity of who they are, but they leave the house and they have to put on this persona of, I'm all together, everything's okay. Yeah. And that emotional burden is invisible to everybody else but the person who is feeling it. And oftentimes, when someone finally comes out, let's say they've written a memoir or they finally, go to a public forum, people say, oh my gosh, I never knew. Well, think of that. If you never knew and that person was suffering for decades, probably, all of the energy they had to keep themselves in that line of, don't let them see, don't let them know. It's kind of like that song from Frozen, right? Don't let them see, don't let them know. Right. Except in her case, she got to let it go. We don't get to let it go. We have to keep it like this because we will be judged. Why did you stay? I thought you were smart. I thought you were so strong. Come on, a big man like you and a little woman like that, all of those voices.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think what you speak to is so interesting, that victim blaming that happens, or like the questions that get asked of the victims. I think this is, you touched on that, but that's not even like, there's so much beyond just that. Like you mentioned, like that covering up. That's something that we don't necessarily think about. So thank you for really naming that.
So
And I mean,
Zara, for
yeah.
everyone listening, I want to ask two questions. How many of you know of a person who's been raped? Everybody's probably putting up their hand. Now I want to know, how many of you know a rapist? Right? Are we still holding up our hands?
Yeah. Yeah. Indrani coming in with the tough questions, but I think these are so important. I think these are so important to ask ourselves. We don't necessarily stop to really think about this.
Zara, my husband tells me you just jump right in the deep end of the pool all the time. Why not? I am tired of just like pretending that we could take forever to get there. Let me just get there right now.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. And I think, again, I'm sure our viewers also appreciate that. We're here to hear a little bit more from you, your expertise, your wisdom around this. And I mean, so we were just talking about the burden of gender-based violence. What are the economic costs of gender-based violence?
Ooh, there is a lot of research from big bodies like the World Economic Forum, and the numbers are big. So it's even though I look at the numbers all the time, it's hard for me to wrap my brain around the numbers. Globally, because of gender-based violence, the world loses about $8 trillion. Now, if your people want the link, I can dig up the link and send it to you, and you can send it on. What does that mean? It means everything from lost productivity to lost wages, to increased healthcare, to increased mental health needs by, let's say, children in the school system, to drug abuse and the ensuing effects on that. Violence starts here and it bleeds into all of those places. And every one of those lines has a loss number. So when we say globally, we're adding all of that up.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you have experienced violence, perhaps you can do a little bit of math in your head. I missed 4 days work every month. I missed 3 months. And during the pandemic, Sarah, violence increased by 40%.
Yeah.
Not only did it increase, women, most likely more women lost work because now they had abuse, and now they have to stay home with with the household and the childcare. All of those things add up. And I don't even know how much $8 trillion is. I have no idea, other than, oh my gosh, that's a lot. And it's so easy for somebody to say, prove it. And I don't have to prove it. I can just send the research. You can ask, you can go to your local nonprofits. You can go to your local police officer, the reports, and you can begin to see so many days are lost because of violence.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting also because that's such a large number. It's hard to really fathom like what it means. And so having you kind of break down even all the different areas, like the examples, it just makes it so much clearer for folks that may really struggle to understand like how large of a number that is, or also to understand like what feeds into that number. So thank you for kind of naming like a few of the different areas. So as we're kind of talking about like gender-based violence, and especially like as it might show up in the workplace, if we are in a position where a colleague discloses to us that they are a victim of gender-based violence, how can we really support them?
I'm going to answer the difficult part first.
Okay.
If I'm the colleague and I have experienced violence and I have not looked at my own violence, and you are the person confiding in me, I am most likely going to judge you. Why? Well, I sucked it up. Why can't you? Oh, he only hit you once. he's been hitting me or she's been hitting me for 10 years.
Mm.
So when we choose who we're going to confide in, we have to know that person very, very well.
Mm-hmm.
Brene Brown, you know Brene Brown, she's the vulnerability courage person. She has a very simple formula for who to trust. Have they earned the right for your deepest exposures? And so if you just met that person at work, or if you speak to them twice a month, that's not the person to go to first. Before you say something to anyone at work, you have to find a trusted person, maybe outside of work, understand what it feels like to speak the words.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you find the courage, then find the right person at work to speak to. Just because somebody is in the HR department doesn't mean that they can hold this big thing. And it is a big thing. So I'm sorry that the answer is not more direct and more clear. Okay, now let's go to part 2. If you find someone who can hold it. So let's say I'm speaking to you and you have the empathy and the compassion. The first thing you do is to be quiet. The second thing you do is to say, are you safe? Are you safe? If the person says, yeah, I'm safe, then you can say, is there anything else you'd like to tell me? How else may I help you? And that's why I think it's important for companies to start at least implementing some simple domestic violence policies where perhaps somebody who is in charge of HR, or maybe you're outsourcing HR, they can then send all the telephone numbers, all the local places where you can access help, including sometimes there's free legal help. So you have all of that stuff. And now you're thinking, oh, I'm not the only person that this happens to. You have a formal way for me to get some help. Maybe that's all they need, is to be heard and to know that, okay, thank you, I'm safe, and now I'm feeling energetically safe because you didn't judge me and you are saying, I'm here.
Yeah.
Sometimes
I think that non-judgment piece, Indrani, I think that is such a crucial part.
Yeah, but you can only do that if you yourself have worked out all of your own stuff.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. 100%. And I also think, like what you said, that the first thing you should ask that question of, are you safe? I think that's so helpful for folks who may not know how to approach this situation. You know, if you find yourself in the end where someone does trust you enough to disclose, like, how do you respond? I think even starting off with that question of, are you safe? Like that's such a great starting point.
And that you're not asking a specific thing. You're not saying, are you getting beaten? Are you safe when you're home? You just generally, are you safe? And that person gets to decide what that means on their own. Right. Are you safe? You cannot say, oh, you should leave that person. You should go home right now and say blah, blah, blah. One of the most dangerous times for a victim is when they decide to leave, because violence is all about power. It's all about control over, power over. So if someone's trying to control me, and let's say they've controlled me for 10 years, and now I say, I'm gonna leave you, I'm not, what? I've lost control over you. Now I'm gonna have to come down with a hammer. If you leave me, I'm gonna do this, 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 and this.
Right.
What if they're not threatening your children or humans? A lot of times abusers threaten your pets.
Wow.
If you do this, you will see what I'm going to do with, and don't we love our pets? Yes. So, I mean, people who've never heard all these intricacies are going, what? That can't be true. It's true.
Yeah. No, I think again, it's important to be sharing this information because you don't know what you don't know. And so I think it is helpful to kind of know all the different ways. And like what you said, those power dynamics, that's so important to be thinking about and how they show up in abusive situations. And I know you started speaking about this, but really kind of thinking a little bit more about when a person is seeking help for any sort of gender-based violence, how can their employer support them? So I know you started talking about having some sort of policies in place. Is there anything else that you can think of that employers can do to support victims of gender-based violence?
I think even before employers have policies in place, employers can do, now everybody knows about Zoom, right? Employers can do some monthly meetings with local organizations that are there to support women and say, can you come in and speak for 15, 20 minutes on the state of what we're seeing locally and what your organization can do? So anybody who comes to that meeting, nobody knows if you're a victim or not, but now everybody knows, oh, this is in our own backyard. Wow, this is amazing. So for instance, in Houston, we have an umbrella organization called HCDVCC, and it's the Harris County Domestic Violence Coordination Council. And there are so many organizations that feed into that council, everything from shelters to the legal systems, the medical people, the police officers. So in Houston, if you reach out to those people, they're happy to come and tell you what's going on.
Right.
And it's in a safe place because everybody is hearing that information.
Right. It's
That's
open.
one of the easiest things you can do, right? And if you want to even make it a little easier, the employer can say, okay, I'm giving everybody $5 for pizza. Get pizza, have it delivered to your house, and have a brown bag lunch from your Zoom at home. How easy is that?
Yeah. And I really like the having an open space. So it's just information sharing. It's not necessarily having to identify any certain way, which I think is great. And I think, so we have, I have one more question that I wanted to ask of you. And then I know that we have a question from the audience as well. But we started talking about like different ways that we can kind of information share within the workplace. In general, what do you think is really needed to eradicate gender-based violence?
Eradicate, right? When I first started my foundation, I was so Pollyanna. I thought, oh, I'm going to end this in my lifetime. When you don't know what you don't know, I really sounded stupid. I don't know if we can eradicate it ever, but we can reduce it.
Okay.
And if we keep reducing it for each and every generation, we might get to eradication. The other part of that answer is this. I belong to a nonprofit called Every Woman Treaty, and we are in process of ratifying a global treaty against violence against women. So people might say, that's never going to work. So my question is this. When was the last time you were able to smoke on an airplane? Not allowed to smoke on an airplane? Well, that happened in my lifetime. The first 35 years of my life, there were 2 seats of non-smoking and the whole rest of the airplane was smoking, as if the smoke wasn't coming over right into the back of the plane. Because of the tobacco treaty, that was some 30 years ago, now we are seeing the effects of smoke not being allowed in so many places. So this is what a global treaty can do for us, but over the long term.
Yeah.
So the global treaty will help us to identify what legal resources have to be there, medical, police people, schools, and also look at, yes, we say we have some systems in place. We have some shelters, we have some beds. There are never going to be enough beds if we don't stop this craziness. So let's look at what we have now. Let's see how we can make that stronger as we do all the other things that have to be done so we could get to a point where 30 years from now, a little kid could say, violence against women and kids, that's not a thing.
Isn't
right?
that the dream? That would be the dream.
That is the dream. Fingers crossed that I'm still alive to see it, because I'm 69 this year. So that's a long time from now.
You've also been doing this work for a while,
Yeah.
so I think we very much appreciate you kind of sharing, your thoughts and your expertise around this. And I know we had a question from the audience around talking about family violence and what effect does family violence have on the workplace?
Okay, so when we say family violence, we are still talking about domestic violence in the home. Yeah. Domestic violence and intimate partner violence, it's both family violence. Intimate partner violence means somebody that was a lover or a husband or a boyfriend. Family violence is anybody who is a part of your family who keeps inflicting violence on you. Mm-hmm. Remember we said violence is going to come over?
Yeah.
It's going to bleed, like you said. Those were your words. So when we're all finished, I want everyone, I don't have a glass of clear water with me now. Take a glass of water from the pipe, the tap, and see how clear it is. Hopefully your water is clear. If it's not, let the sediment sink. Then take a little bit of like food coloring and put one drop in the water. It may still look clear, but you will know that you just put that in there. That is how violence drips into your life. Keep putting food coloring into the water, and pretty soon that water is no longer clear. Mm-hmm. And this is what so you can visually see that, right?
Yeah. Sometimes it's hard to, again, like understand. So having like visual, representation is important. Someone else asks, what's the best way to deal with gender-based violence at home or at workplace or anywhere in your life?
So let's start with at home, because I think I have an innocent, simple idea that if we can all end violence within our own homes, we can imagine, right? Imagine the webs of no more violence inside everyone's home. We would stop accepting it. So how do you end violence at home? To everyone listening, we've all said things, we've all done things. Nobody's a saint here, no, especially not me. Can we go home tonight? And I don't know where you're sitting. If it's your night, when you're done, can you gather your people and say, I heard a 68-year-old lady today talk about violence. And she said, could we go home and say to our family, I'm sorry. I know that I've been part of the sadness and the pain in this family, and I want for tomorrow to be different. So I'm asking for help. I am apologizing for what I have done. And yes, I know I yell and I scream and I this and I that. Can we come up with a safe word that when you see that I'm going over the edge, you say the word hippopotamus. And I promise to honor that word, and I will put myself in timeout. Mm-hmm. You're not putting other people in timeout, right? If we have the courage to do that, what will our families do? Have you lost your mind? No, I haven't lost my mind. I would really like to see if we can do this. And after saying it for a couple of weeks and maybe following through, maybe now your people will be brave enough to say, you know what? Sometimes you do this and we get scared. Or sometimes you do this and we get scared. Let me just give you a very short example. During COVID, I started coaching individual advocates, even though I hadn't been doing that in a while. There was a young woman. She was a mother of 3. She was going through a divorce. The kids were 6, 4, and 2. So the 6-year-old was the oldest. And I said, she said, well, I really, there's no violence. And my husband was the one who's violent and he's gone. And I said, so no screaming, yelling, cursing. And she said, well, I only curse when I have to. Okay, tell me about that. Well, I tell the 6-year-old to do something and they won't do it. And after 3 or 4 times, I say, what the? And then they do it. So the cursing works.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, okay, have you ever asked that little child how they feel when you curse? And she said, no, but they look okay. And I said, so ask.
Yeah.
And the kid said to the mom, I get so scared. I get so scared that you're going to leave me because you sound so angry and you sound like you hate me.
Wow.
She called and said she was crying. I had no idea. That's because she had the courage to ask.
Right.
What did we do? I said, can you just get an empty bottle and say it's the swear jar? And whenever you swear, the kids have to say, Mom, you have to put a quarter in the jar. And at the end of the week, the kids get the money.
Yeah.
It's not your money anymore.
Right.
And she did it. And the kids decorated the bottle. And now the kids were looking, right? But she was also aware. Because it was a 6-year-old who would say, Mom, you need to put money in the jar. Somebody put up a money thing. And she started doing it. Now, she stopped coaching after a few months. I hope she's still doing it. But that was a little thing that she could do. So that's where we start. We start small.
Thank you so much for that, Indrani. This was so helpful to really hear certain information around this, but also to get really tactical strategies from you around how we can really show up for not only for ourselves, but for our colleagues that might be dealing with this. So I just want to thank you so much for being here and for sharing your expertise. It was wonderful chatting with you.
So I'm beyond grateful that you invited me. Thank you so much. As you can see, when I'm talking about my work, I never frown. People say, so here's the one thing. People say, isn't it hard to hear all those stories? And I say, if someone is in front of me telling a story, 2 things are happening. They are alive and they're telling me the story, and I am looking at a hero. So that's why there's always a smile on my face.
Thank you, Indrani. I love that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.